All right, and we are recording. All right, so hopefully people will start to join in just a minute. There we go. Welcome this morning. This is the 8th in our series for our chamber chats. And this one today is going to be focused on 4Culture Relief Fund for art, culture, and preservation organizations. Welcome. We're just going to give it a few minutes for people to join, and then we will get started. Very exciting presentation today, really interesting information. And just remember, we do record these so that you can go to our Vashon Chamber website at vashonchamber.com and look at them later. And we also will post the slides so you can access those as well. Great. So again, welcome. It's a little overcast today here on Vashon, but still has been just incredibly beautiful weather. And I know everybody appreciates that, certainly helps everybody's spirits. So we have a pretty good number of people on, and I think probably just give it another minute and we will get started. And then we'll introduce you to our speakers. Also, I should just introduce myself. I've been doing these so often, I think I forget to mention, but I'm Cheryl Liebert. I actually own Nashi Orchards and Cidery, and also am a longtime Vashon resident and the president of the Chamber Board. Happy to host to help our nonprofit organizations and also our businesses on the island. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Welcome this morning, Heather and Brett. Thank you for joining us. And both Heather and Brett are part of the 4Culture organization. And I'm gonna let both of them introduce themselves. So Heather, why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Heather Dwyer. I'm actually now a Vashon resident, so I'm really happy to be here, and it's been an amazing community already. I've only been here about, owned a house for a year and a half and lived on the island for about a year. So I'm still adjusting, but it's been a really wonderful welcome. So I just want to say that I work primarily with individual artists at 4Culture. I've been at 4Culture for about 16 years, I think, maybe 17. And my background is working directly with individual artists. And I've worked for government organizations, nonprofits, as a studio assistant, and my education is all in the arts and primarily in the visual arts. And then we have the amazing Brett Fetzer.
I'm Brett Fetzer. I live in Capitol Hill in Seattle. And my background is I'm a writer and a theater artist and a filmmaker. And I've also been at 4Culture for like 16, 17 years, although not full-time all that time. And I work primarily with organizations. So Heather and I kind of are a good pairing, because I can talk about the ways in which we support organizations and she can talk about individuals. So I don't know what else I can say. Oh, back to Heather.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started and let's see what you guys got for us. Do you want to talk about the 4Culture Relief Fund? So take it away.
Okay. So the 4Culture Cultural Relief Fund, like many COVID-related relief funds, has been sort of pulled together frantically, I should say. We have always valued being responsive and as supportive of the King County community as much as possible. Our director, Brian Carter, had a conversation with me at one point fairly early on, and he said, how do you think we should respond? We're thinking for individuals or for organizations, we can really bolster up some of their funding, but what would work for individuals? So we talked about it for a while, and I thought that it would be important to be broader than individual artists, which is usually what we focus on, but be a little bit more expansive to support the entire cultural community, cultural workers, including people who are curators, historians, people that work on historic preservation carpentry, maybe somebody that works in a box office or as a set designer, a little bit more holistic than what we're thinking of as in terms of individual artists in our usual regular programs. And then we also talked about really developing a emergency relief program that would be separate from our other programs, that would be something that would be equitable in the sense that it would be open to anyone. It wouldn't have the restrictions that some of our other programs have on it. And it would also be a much easier application so that it would not be something that would add additional stress to people's lives as they were going through such a stressful situation. So we kind of tried to keep all of those things in mind. And then I actually got really sick and was trying to map out what I thought would work for a relief fund. And that was sort of the seed, I think, of how this all developed. And so I guess we can go to the next slide. Can you go to the next? Oh, there we go. So just to back up a little bit, 4Culture supports 4 cultural areas: arts, heritage, historic preservation, and public art. And I think here on Vashon, there's many different organizations and individuals who have been supported. We have supported the Heritage Museum. There are events that we've supported, certainly individual artists over the years, structures and venues, a lot of research projects have also been supported on Vashon. So maybe Brett can throw out some examples too of specific organizations that we've funded, but we have had a nice broad reach here on Vashon, and these are our working areas that we focus on. Next slide. Just quickly, 4Culture is a strange beast. We are a cultural services provider for King County. We are not a county agency, however. We were, and then in 2003, we were asked to kind of separate ourselves and become our own entity, which we did so, and we are funded through lodging tax. So it is tax funding, but it's money that is generated through hotel and motel stays. It's 0.5% of every stay in a hotel or motel. And then we also receive Percent for Art, which supports our public art program. And that would be any capital improvement projects or renovation projects on county property. So King County property. So that's really still our deep tie to King County, is often through our Percent for Art dollars. But we do support the visitors and citizens of King County. That is our mandate. Next slide. And here's our fairly new mission and vision. We are really committed deeply to racial equity, and we advocate to support and enhance the quality of life in King County. And we really want to make sure that it's as accessible as possible to all citizens. That can be very challenging for us, of course, but it's something that staff is really committed to, and our board and our advisory committees. Everyone's really committed to making sure that our offerings are really accessible, and that we're constantly learning how to make that more possible. Next slide. And so now I think Brett and I can really dig into the specifics about the Cultural Relief Fund. We have designated over $1 million to cultural workers and cultural organizations in King County. We're hopeful that we can kind of grow this fund beyond $1 million. That's taking some shuffling and reconfiguring, and definitely tightening some of our budget on other items at work. But I think that there's a real strong commitment to this program, and there's certainly staff is seeing the need. So that's the hard part, is seeing the great need out there. We experience it personally, but also just kind of getting more statistical information from King County and the region, that we realize this is, as you all know, we're in it for the long haul. So 4Culture is trying to anticipate what we can support in the short term and long term. Did you have anything to add to that, Brett, in terms of like how you're feeling about organizational support in general?
Well, just mostly it became very quickly very clear that the need was going to really outstrip our capacity to meet it. And we are doing what we can, but we basically plundered other funding programs in order to channel money into this cultural relief, because it was clear that this was where the need was. This had to be the priority. And we're hoping that, and it's looking promising so far, that we're going to get some more money from King County, but that's not guaranteed yet. Yeah, but it's pretty brutal looking at how much need there is and how little of it we're able to fund. There have been over 200 applications on the organization side and over 800 on the individual side. Heather, you can give an update on where that's at. We've managed to fund on the organization side around 25% of that. And we'll be able to fund more as we go along. We've actually been holding money back so that we can have money every week for the full 7 weeks of this round, and then we're going to have a second round of funding after that, I believe. Heather, is that correct?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. But so like we've been one can make sure that like just because people got in first, they weren't the only ones to get money. So because we realized that not everyone was going to immediately learn about this, and we wanted to make sure that we still had money to fund people who didn't have the immediate access to our funding. That didn't want to advantage people who had, like, say, development departments and could be keeping track of this. We wanted to make sure that smaller organizations with all volunteer staff could still have access to funds if they were only applying in like the 7th week of the 7-week round. So there is still money to be had, basically. If you haven't applied yet, you are still in a position to receive support if you need it.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful and important distinction between our program and some of the other opportunities that are out there. It's overwhelming, I think, for people to see how many organizations are trying to offer support, and it can just be kind of a sea of resources. And then what I'm hearing is that people are trying to apply, or applying and not hearing back, or not just that the money's gone, you know, that they'll apply and then they find out that it's all tapped out. So that can be so discouraging, and again, adding stress on top of stress. So I think our sort of layered approach has been good in that regard, and so that people feel like there is some hope and opportunity out there. Although, yeah, I totally agree. It's just, it feels like a drop in the bucket. We can just kind of quickly run through the sort of 4 different ways we're responding right now. One is the Cultural Relief Emergency Fund, and this is for individual cultural workers. And again, this is broader than individual artists. These are cultural workers, are people that work in culture and devote their existence to culture. So that may be artists, but it also may be, like I said earlier, people that work within the heritage preservation, public art fields. Maybe they do fabrication, things like that. So I want to make sure that people feel that they're included in that community if they feel that they're, you know, oh, I'm not a traditional artist. And when we talk about artists, we at 4Culture, it's usually media, people that work in media, music, film, theater, dance, visual arts, literary arts, Did I get everybody? Those are usually the
Interdisciplinary.
yeah, interdisciplinary artists, which of course there's a lot here on Vashon and people that work in the performing arts here. And then the creative response, so I should back up. The emergency response is for grants of up to $2,000. And they are really directed to individuals who have had, who have significant financial need. So this is for folks who need to pay rent, mortgage, buy groceries, figure out how to pay utility bills. I mean, just the basics of sustaining their existence. Because we are a tax-based organization in terms of our funding, we do have to technically purchase a cultural service from you. So we will be asking applicants to identify a public benefit that they have created or can create in the future. And that might be, you know, offering a reading online, or it might be a music download, or it might be that they have worked at a theater in the last 5 years, and you know they can show a little bit of dedication to that and providing that benefit for the community. So it's really just kind of showing that they truly are a cultural worker and have committed to supporting that life in King County. And then we also have the Creative Response Fund, which is also grants up to $2,000. And this is an kind of interesting take. It's for folks who are developing an idea or are currently pursuing an idea that has a significant impact on the general public around COVID-19. And that has been a really interesting opportunity for some artists who may not be experiencing, you know, deep financial need. We want to make sure that people focus on their survival first. But if people are feeling that desire to be helpful and they have their basic needs met, this is a chance for people to share that work. We have, there's an artist who has a 3D printer, and he learned how to create medical shields out of some of his 3D printing and sculptural materials, his sculptural fabrication equipment. So he's been cranking those out, and he's helped people learn how to make those if they have similar tools. We have an artist who's been working with the tiny house villages in Seattle, trying to make those places more just frankly humane and welcoming. And so she's been granted money to kind of continue that work and bolster it and make it better. So those are just a couple of examples, but it's really that kind of response to this crisis for those folks that have a creative solution in some way. And then Brett can talk about the organizations, which has been, of course, a big focus for 4Culture because there's such a great need there too.
Sure. Yeah. So for cultural organizations, there are grants of up to $5,000 available. As Heather mentioned a moment ago, technically, because we're working with public funds that come from our tax dollars, we cannot just give money away. We have to be purchasing artistic services, generally speaking, with our funding. And what when she talked about public benefit is also any efforts you are making to make your work, your artistic services, more accessible to King County residents and visitors, and particularly to underserved communities within King County. However, I'm not sure if this applies to individuals or not, but within the organization, because there's such a variety in the kinds of organizations we have and their capacity to provide any kind of services online right now may not be limited. So we have expanded kind of the range. So if you are providing services before the pandemic hit, before the lockdown, that can also be included in the public service that you're offering. And I think we can go back as far as November. So if you had activity between November and March before the lockdown, that can be counted as your public benefit. And then also, we can also look ahead, although that's, of course, a little risky because we don't really exactly know when things are going to end, if they are going to end in any literal sense. But we're trying to be as flexible as possible in terms of making it possible for you to claim these funds. Because obviously, I mean, I was really hoping that we could argue that simply preserving the existence of artistic organizations and heritage and public and historic preservation organizations was a public benefit in and of itself, but I got shot down in terms of that argument, I'm afraid. But we will work with you to make sure to find a way in which we can reasonably argue that you are providing public benefit. So if you're not able to provide something online, that's not the end of the world. We can work around that in other ways.
Yeah. Well, and I just as an example, Brett and I were communicating just yesterday with a Vashon business about how they might be eligible for these funds or how they might fit into the funding community of 4Culture. I mean, what we do is give grants and offer commissions to individuals. So we were able to strategize, and Brett had some great ideas with this individual who's got a business on Vashon to figure out how would they be most competitive, how could they just, you know, be able to receive funding from 4Culture to keep some of their cultural activities going, and especially during this time when they don't have the other revenue. So I think that's an important thing for people to know, just that we're artists and we have a passion for the people that we support, and we communicate as staff back and forth like, hey, let's help this person out. Do you guys have any ideas? I mean, that's what we do, and our heart's really in it. So I think people should feel, I hope people feel comfortable reaching out directly to staff, and we can show you how to do that later. But it can be really important to have that entry point to 4Culture. I just want to say too that we do have a really amazing resource page, a COVID-19 related resource page on our website that Willow Fox and Anna Callahan in our office have really worked hard to put together. It has information about other grant opportunities for cultural workers and cultural organizations, but it also has small business information, some links to legal services. There are some of the creative ways of kind of coping, some healthcare assistance, and just some really good like survival information there that you might not find elsewhere. And we're also teaming up with King County Creative, which is an office out of the King County Executive's office, Dow Constantine's office. We're teaming up with them to support a peer-to-peer networking program through an online platform that really allows a business professional to meet with another business professional or another creative to talk about, like, how am I going to navigate these next 6 months, or what do we do if, you know, we can half open our theater, or what do we do if I can, you know, do this but I can't do that. So it's going to be a really helpful tool, I believe, for that one-on-one mentorship that I think so many people in the creative industries and in the cultural community will be able to take advantage of. So I just want to touch, going back to the fund that we have now. The first round of funding was made available on April 1st, and it will run through May 15th. So we don't have a lot more time here in this first round, but we do anticipate having more funding after May 15th. But we did want to have kind of a set round for this first segment, so that as staff, we could kind of grab a hold of it and kind of keep it organized. But you can apply at any time. You need to create an account like you might for, you know, signing up for any online business or platform. And once you're on our system, the application takes about 30 minutes, I would say. And then we have them reviewed weekly by a peer panel review group, which is really made up on the individual side. It's primarily made up of individual artists, and they are from all over King County, and they work in all different disciplines. And we currently have a Vashon resident who's serving as a peer panelist. And they initially were reviewing, hundreds, and emailing me saying, I can't do this, it's too much. But now the volume of applications is slowing to a much more manageable rate. So they are able to review those, they score them, they provide comments, and then we have an allocations committee that meets, and then we essentially we just fund those that we have enough money for that meet a certain ranking. It sounds brutal, but that's kind of what it comes down to when it's such a competitive process. But this process has been working, and we have been able to notify folks within 10 business days. And then we're trying to contract with our first big pool right now. So we're hoping to get the money out quickly. And I'm hoping we can get some money in people's hands before the 1st of May, because so many people have rent due and mortgages due. So my personal goal. Did you have anything to add to that, Brett, about timing and?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that on the organization side, the form is a little more complicated. We tried to keep it as simple as possible, but because we're working with organizations, we had to ask more information, and we had to get more kind of legal info and things like that. So I can't promise that you can finish the organization application within 30 minutes, unfortunately. And the first few weeks here, there's been a really, most of the organizations being funded are organizations that have been in danger of losing their space or laying people off. So, I mean, the need has been really, really incredibly dire on that side so far. But I think we're starting to have addressed most of those organizations, I'm hoping, and we'll be able to start funding organizations that have simply lost enormous amounts of income because they weren't able to have events or fundraisers, and start being able to shore people up in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody out here knows that it's having this occur right at a really significant fundraising time has been hugely challenging for individuals and certainly organizations as well. So
spring is really the peak arts time.
Every gala, every auction.
Yeah.
It's hard. Okay, so for cultural workers, the eligibility is fairly straightforward. You need to be an individual that can demonstrate that you have ongoing work in what we consider the cultural fields of arts, heritage, preservation, or public art. You need to be a full-time resident of King County, be at least 18 years of age, not be in any degree seeking program, simply because the need is so great here. And we have a sense that folks in a degree-based program have access to other resources potentially. And obviously you can't be a staff member, one of our advisory committee members, or a board member, just to keep on the up and up. And we do ask all of our peer reviewers to fill out a conflict of interest form so that we can make sure that if there's any direct conflicts that arise, that we can ask them not to review and vote and score on those applications to keep it as fair as possible. Next slide. So the evaluation criteria, this is basically what we give to the review panelists to assess each application that's eligible. And I will say we've had a lot of ineligible applications this funding program, primarily because people living in Brooklyn are confusing Kings County with King County. we've had a lot of folks from Brooklyn applying, but it is important to make sure that that you are eligible. But then the criteria is fairly straightforward after that, that you're experiencing a direct financial impact from the COVID-19 virus outbreak, including things like lost wages or gigs, ticket sales, book sales, or a loss of opportunity. So when we were first kind of developing this program, there were artists that I was talking to who had, for example, had an exhibition canceled. And it wasn't that they anticipated a great number of sales, but they had been told or had felt that that particular opportunity was going to lead to additional opportunities that would be financially beneficial to them. Other things like residency programs where people, had an opportunity to go make a body of work and really focus on their professional development. And those were all canceled. So it isn't necessarily direct income, but it can be a loss of opportunity. And then again, for the other program that for the creative response program, it's that the applicant is articulating a creative idea that shows significant, potential significant impact to King County residents dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be someone who is currently diagnosed positive. It just means that it needs to support our community at this time. And then that they demonstrate a compelling need for the funds, and that they do, as Brett was talking about, have evidence of some kind of creative work or cultural work in the last 6 months or in the 6 months going forward. So that meets our public benefit requirements. And since we have to purchase cultural services, that's what we need to kind of understand from each applicant. Next slide. So this would be organizations.
Sure. And the eligibility is similar. Any organization, the primary mission has to relate to arts, heritage, or historic preservation. We've had and sometimes that can be a gray area, and we actually formed a whole eligibility committee to evaluate organizations applying that are a little on the cusp. Like, for example, we just had an organization that is a photo studio, and they provide incredibly valuable support to photographers and heritage organizations and historic preservation organizations in terms of like printing photos, but they're not themselves the creators, and that was and it was also a for-profit business. And so that ended up not being considered eligible. We tried to steer them towards the cultural workers, which is a little more flexible in terms of that nonprofit requirement. You don't necessarily, I should really be going through these in sequence. Hold on. It is nonprofit in there somewhere? No, I don't think it is actually. So let me talk a little bit about that. So you don't actually have to be a nonprofit organization, but if you are not a nonprofit organization, you still have to have a primary focus on arts, heritage, and preservation. And you'll also need to get a fiscal sponsor that is a nonprofit. Now, there are some organizations like Shunpike and Allied Arts Seattle and Fractured Atlas, and that's one of the main things they do is provide fiscal sponsorship and kind of administrative support for arts and heritage and preservation organizations that are not themselves yet a 501c3 nonprofit. So just letting you know, there are ways around that if you are an organization with that primary mission that does not yet have nonprofit status. You must have a minimum of 2 years record of programming or activity, and you'll need to provide evidence of that. You must be located in and serving King County, and as with cultural workers, you must demonstrate a direct financial impact from the outbreak of COVID-19, including loss of income or loss of opportunity. I think Heather did a really nice job of distinguishing between those two and what that's about. And then again, you must not be 4Culture staff or advisory committee board member or cultural relief panelist during this period of review.
Next slide. That's your criteria for organizations.
So yeah, obviously financial hardship. I think that one is really not so difficult to prove because almost everyone is experiencing financial hardship. And emergency, this is what a lot of what we've been funding so far in the first few weeks here has been people who are really like on the brink of like, if I don't get money right away, I'm going to lose, like a theater that's going to lose its space, or an art gallery that's going to lose its space, or having to lay off people again. Those are kind of the most high priority items, but there are others. There's all kinds of need. And then there's public benefit, which we have already talked about fairly extensively. Sorry, I feel like I'm not quite as focused here.
Next slide. I think we're close to the end. So now's a good time to take questions, and I just wanted to point out that this this graphic is by a local artist, Ellen Forney, and she has been working with the guidelines from the World Health Organization, and she developed this on her own. I think, again, kind of one of those artists that's responding creatively to all of the information and feeling a need to help the community. So this is just something she created on her own, and she's gonna have it as it is a free download, and it sounds like that might be something the chamber is willing to post. And so I will be able to provide that for you, and you could post it in your businesses or post it at home. But it's a good, funny reminder of how to take care of yourself.
And also, this is another kind of example of public benefit, where she is basically using her skills and talents to help get information about the pandemic across. That's a really providing information about resources that are available to people, and anything like that. That is also public benefit. It doesn't necessarily have to be you presenting a performance or an artwork of some kind.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Okay, great. Well, Heather and Brett, it's really great to learn about the fund, and I think it sounds like you guys have been very thoughtful on how you put it together to really support art organizations and cultural organizations, and of course preservation organizations. I'd like to open it up for questions from folks right now. If you can put them in the chat or into the Q&A. But I actually have a question for you that came in that was kind of an interesting idea. Have you had any collectives actually put forth for any kind of grant? So, just thinking about Vashon, we have the Vashon Center for the Arts, we have Open Space, we have the Heritage Museum. We have a whole list of different studios and organizations. We have Viva, which is the visual, arts organization. And we were just curious as to whether anybody had actually kind of joined together for a community and put in for the fund, and whether that was something that you might consider.
I think it's absolutely something we'd consider. I don't think, I can't off the top of my head think of any examples of that. I'm not sure that would necessarily be beneficial because the grants have such a cap on them. I think that the individuals would probably be better off applying for funds individually rather than as a group, because I think they'll be likely to get more money if they do get awarded.
Right. Great. Well, that makes sense then. So everybody should actually apply individually.
Yeah.
Speaking of individuals, I got a question that came in for those individuals or organizations that weren't funded in the first round. Will they be considered for the second round of funding?
Well, actually, I'm not entirely sure about that. When I talk about round, I'm talking about the whole 7-week thing here. And each week we are looking at applications distinctly. So if you applied in that first week, and you didn't get funded in that first week, your application is still reconsidered every successive week for the 7 weeks. But I think once that 7 weeks is over, you may need to reapply in the second round. Heather, do you know about that?
I think that's what we're going to do. I mean, we're really making a lot of this up as we go. We don't want to sound unprofessional, but that's where we are. I think that yeah. I think that we feel like people's circumstances may change dramatically in that 7-week period. And so having people reapply at that point might give a more current picture for either individuals or organizations about where they really stand.
I've had a few people, a few organizations talk to me about how, like, well, right now things aren't so terrible, but in, like, yeah, when we get to like the end of May, we're really going to be in trouble at that point. And I've actually encouraged them, then don't apply now, because basically you're going to be ranked according to your need right now, because there are so many people coming in with really severe need at the moment. And so you should wait. I mean, not that you should wait until things are horrible, but if you're okay at the moment, you're probably better off waiting until you're a little more right on top of that time moment when it's going to be awful. It's horrible to say, but I mean that is unfortunately kind of like, this is the best system we've been able to come up to in order to kind of like make sure we're getting the money to the people who are in most need of it right now.
Yeah, and you do have to strategize. I mean, a lot of the funds that are out there, at least for individuals, are very, very time-based, in the sense of, like, the money runs out. So it truly is first come, first serve. I do appreciate how we've structured this so that that's not necessarily the case, and you can really time things the best for you. But that said, the other support systems that I've seen out there are really, you've got to jump on them as soon as you see them. And, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, depending on how you look at it, within Washington State, we don't have other means of prioritizing organizations and individuals other than first come, first serve. I mean, you see that with housing, for example, in Seattle, where you need to take the first applicant for a tenant. There's some of those restrictions that occur, and that can be the case in grant funding as well. I would like to share that one of the allocation components that we do include, in addition to your review, is that we do have a sort of an equity screen that we place on each application. And for any application that comes in outside of Seattle, people receive sort of a bonus point for being outside of the city of Seattle, because there simply are more resources there. So we're trying to be a bit more equitable in funding a broader geographic area. And so that's—
to clarify, there are more resources for people who live in Seattle and fewer resources for people outside Seattle.
Yes, did I say the opposite?
Just the way you said it could be interpreted the other way.
Okay, sorry. So we just want to encourage people outside of the city of Seattle to apply for our funds, and we reward that, I guess I would say. So that's just something for folks on Vashon to keep in mind.
Yeah, we take very seriously that we are the King County funding agency, and we want to make sure we are getting money out to all of King County, from Auburn up to Shoreline out to Duval. We want to fund everybody.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're coming up on our time right now. So I want to just thank both of you, Heather and Brett, for your time this morning to talk about this fund. It sounds like it's very useful for, I think, for people in the arts and culture area. Just to kind of move on to let everybody know what we've got coming up next. Our webinar series, we have one more in our bi-weekly series, which is breathing tips for health in the workplace, with Robert Littman, who's also a Vashon native. And Robert actually owns a company called the Breathable Body. And it's all about breathing tips to sort of reduce stress and to improve your immune system. So it's all about mental health and wellness for yourself and for your workers. And so he's going to be doing that this Thursday, April 30th at 9 a.m., similar format. After this, we are actually going to move to a monthly webinar format. But please, if you have ideas, we are happy to put these up faster if we need to, more frequently than the monthly. But please send your topics into executive director@vashonchamber.com if you have things that you would like to either present that you think would be helpful to our business community, or that are just good ideas that you feel like everybody can benefit from. We also want to remind everybody on the Vashon-Chamber.com website, we do have our comprehensive list of vetted COVID-19 business resources, and that hand washing guide will be up there and available. And then also we have our virtual and essential Vashon business guide and our restaurant resources. Great places for you to get information. And we also, as everybody knows, well, maybe not everybody knows, but we have launched our Ask the Expert office hours, where you can get one-on-one help for your business or organization around finance, SBA loans, marketing, your website, employment issues, if you've got questions about how to deal and navigate with unemployment, insurance questions, and then also business transformation. Because right now we've got a lot of challenges, but out of that crisis, maybe transformation or new ideas and an innovation can actually be born. So, our Ask Experts page has contact information and hours for people there, and you can contact those people and have one-on-one help. So check out VashonChamber.com for that information. And we are adding new experts all the time. And then the last thing I just want to remind everybody about is this Friday and every Friday going forward, we do have our virtual networking coffee at 8 a.m. For local businesses. So if you get a chance, join us. It's a great opportunity to learn about other businesses, and also just to brainstorm ideas about how we're dealing with the situation and how we can help each other navigate this difficult situation, and just share ideas. And it's a great camaraderie, not to mention it's always nice to see people's faces and have some coffee on a Friday morning. Anyway, hope people can join us. With that, I'd just like to thank Brett and Heather. If you want to get in touch with them, here's their contact information. Also, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and will be up on the Chamber chat on the VashonChamber.com website, so you can go back and reference it. Additionally, we will be sending this out to all of the nonprofit organizations and our mailing list, so people will be able to learn about it there. It's nice to know that there are some additional resources still available for organizations, especially for the arts, culture, and also preservation. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for your time today, and check out the Chamber website for good resources. And again, thank you, Heather and Brett, everybody. I hope you're healthy and stay well. All right. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye.